To start making the shawl, we want to work a garter stitch tab. So we're going to start casting on 3 stitches, and we're going to cast on with the knit cast on to make it easier to pick up stitches when we have to start the shawl. I've made a slip knot by bringing the ball yarn over the tail end, and then I'm going to pull the stitch through to make my slip knot and place it on my left needle. I'm now using my right needle, so this is a 2 needle cast on. Take the yarn around the right needle, bring the new loop through, twist it onto the left needle. And I find when I'm doing a knit cast on, if I leave my right needle in the stitch and pull the yarn tight, it's there ready for me to make the next stitch. So I just take the yarn around the needle, pull a new loop through and twist it onto the left needle. So that's my 3 stitches cast on. I now need to knit 6 rows to make the little top edge. One of the reasons for working this little garter stitch tab is that the edges of the shawl, either edge of the shawl, has a 3 garter stitch edging. So by working this 3 stitch tab and then picking up stitches around it, it will give me a seamless top edge. So I have some more stitches, some more rows to knit here. That's 1, 2, 3. So I've got to get 3 on the other side. So this brings me to my 6 rows, and I know I'm ready because my tail end is at the left hand end of my piece of knitting with the right side facing me. So I'm going to knit 3 stitches, then I'm going to turn my knitting, and I need to pick up 3 stitches along this edge. So I'm going to pick up into the garter stitch bumps. So that's 1. I'm just going to take that one back because it's a little bit too deep into the stitch there. So I'm actually going to try and just get the edge bump when I'm picking up the stitch so that we don't get too big a stitch. So that's 1, and then again through the edge without splitting the yarn. That's it, 2 and 1 more. So I've picked up 3 stitches along the edge of the piece of knitting, and now I need to pick up 3 stitches down the cast on edge. So I've gone into the end stitch, 1, and then I've got 2 more loops here. So the knit cast on gives you loops which are easy to see and also allows enough flexibility so that this section of picked up stitches will not be too tight. So we've now picked up all the stitches to start knitting the shawl. I'm going to knit the first 3 stitches and then work a yarn over, which is bringing the yarn between the needles and over the right needle, and then knit 1. I then have to place a stitch marker, knit 2, yarn over, and knit the last 3 stitches. So that's the 2 setup rows. I've now got this section from the beginning to the stitch marker will form section 1, which is the welted chart section, and from the stitch marker to the end of the row is the left edge triangle. The left edge triangle is worked in garter stitch and is the same throughout the whole shawl. As we make the shawl, we will be adding more sections to the right hand side to create the crescent shape. So to start the pattern, you can work from the chart or the written instructions. I'm going to knit the first 3 stitches and work a yarn over, because we're going to do a yarn over increase at the edges on every row. I'm now going to knit 1. The increase between the 2 triangles at the moment is worked 2 stitches away from your stitch marker. So I'm going to bring the yarn forward to do a yarn over, and then I'm going to knit 1, and then the next stitch I'm going to bring the yarn forward and slip the stitch purlwise and then take the yarn back. Slip the marker over to the right needle, knit to the last 3 stitches of the row, yarn over and knit 3. If you are not very experienced in knitting shawls, you may wish to put stitch markers to mark your 3 beginning and edge garter stitches, but I'm not going to. So this is now my first wrong side row. I'm going to knit 3 stitches, bring the yarn over for the increase, knit to the stitch marker. I now slip my stitch marker to my right needle. I'm going to knit the next stitch, bring the yarn forward, slip the next stitch purlwise, take the yarn back, knit the yarn over, and now I'm going to purl these next 2 stitches, because the very first 2 rows in the welting pattern give me stocking stitch. Because I've purled these 2 stitches, I've now got to make a yarn over, but I don't want my yarn over to be short. So if I just went over the needle here now, which would make a yarn over, but it makes quite a short loop. So it's up to you. You don't have to do it this way. You can just do a yarn over and try not to let it get too short. Or you can do what's called a reverse yarn over, which is bringing the yarn between the needles and then over the right needle from back to front, and then knit the last 3 stitches. Now what that does is it places that loop on the knitting needle the wrong way round. So I'm going to knit my first 3 stitches and work my yarn over, and my next loop is not sitting on the needle the way I would normally see it. Now you can either turn it around before you work it, or you can work through the back loop, but whichever way we're going to do it, the next row is going to be a yarn over. I'm going to purl because we're doing welting on this side, so I'm going to purl to 2 stitches before the stitch marker. So that's the 2 stitches before the stitch marker. So I'm now going to work a yarn over, and this time I'm going to work try and work a loose yarn over. So knit the next stitch, yarn forward, slip the next stitch purlwise, yarn back, move the stitch marker, knit to the last 3 stitches of the row, work a yarn over, knit 3. I'm going to knit one more row which will give you the basic stitch pattern for the first 2 sections. So we're going to knit the first 3 stitches, yarn forward for a yarn over, knit to the stitch marker for the left edge triangle, bring a bit more yarn out, slip the stitch marker, knit 1, yarn forward, slip 1 purlwise, yarn back, knit 1, and then on this row we're going to knit to the last 3, then do a normal yarn over, knit 3. So if I now pull this down onto my cable, you can start to see that the shawl is starting to take a little bit of shape. So we're doing welting pattern on this side, which is knit, purl, purl, knit, and we're just doing knit on this side. And you're going to continue repeating those rows and increasing at the edges and the center here in the same way as I've shown you so far, until you've done the required number of rows for the welting section chart before we introduce the new section, which I'll show you when you get to that point.